All you can do is like take the next 4 or 5 steps and believe that once you've taken those 4 or 5 steps, the next 4 or 5 will present themselves to you. And that's all you can do. And you have to get comfortable in being comfortable with that and knowing that. And beautiful things are on the other side.
The most dangerous business podcast in the world. Entrepreneurs and ambitious people, if you want to build a powerful, profitable, impactful business, if you want to study and fall in love with the process, if you want to acquire the skills, habits, and determination you need to level up in business and in life, that's fantastic because I'm working on the same thing. This is the Game of Grow movement. Okay, guys, we're back. Welcome back to Game of Grow. This is, of course, the most dangerous business podcast in the world. It doesn't matter where you start or where you are right now. Are you willing to take the challenge and grow? So I'm really excited about today's podcast. On today's show, we're finally back with a brand new episode of the podcast, and I have a really dope guest for you. We go back quite a number of years now. Man, is it like... Yep. Eight years or 7, 8, 9 years, something like that.
Something like that.
We go back to when we were both starting to find our way in entrepreneurship and the app game. We became friends from there. It's really been a pleasure to watch from afar because you've really grown in what you're doing as a full stack entrepreneur, as you put it. I think it's amazing, and I also think, no doubt, I also think it's a story that's going to inspire a lot of people that are listening right now. So, why don't you tell the Game of Grow community who you are and what you do, and then I'll hit you with some questions.
Awesome. Yeah. So my name is Ismail Maiyegun. I am the co-founder and CTO of Hingeto Company. Hingeto Company is a YC-backed marketplace enablement platform. And I'm also chairman of Big Wolf Company, which is a mobile gaming studio that specializes in IP projects and in gaming tech.
All right, man. And so let's take it back all the way back to the beginning, right?
Cool.
So how did you actually get started in entrepreneurship? What did your career path look like, and how did you get started as an entrepreneur?
Entrepreneurship, man. So it actually started in my childhood, to be honest. Even though it wasn't successful back then. But that's really when it started. My dad kind of sold me dreams of Bill Gates and, what he's been able to accomplish for the world and for himself financially. And so that really just got me going. I've always been an imaginative kid. So, and one of the best things that my parents did for me is they got me a computer really early, at the age of 13. So, with that said, fast forwarding to entrepreneurship, what I did, one of the first businesses I ever tried to do is I used to be huge into video games. So I tried to create a website where you could buy cheats, where you can come to my site, pay whatever, and I would give you all the cheats from that game. I'd go out for a week, come back, play that game, research like crazy, and then come back and say, hey, here you go.
Right.
I only ever got like 2 submissions, and I was never able to accept payment because back then PayPal didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I was in the Middle East, so like it was really hard to like mail anybody anything. So it was kind of silly, but it got me going, right? So that was the very, very first business venture. I'll say I kind of dabbled along the way up until really post college is when I really took the plunge again. I'd gotten a full-time job as a software engineer, became a senior software engineer, but I worked at a place where it was very much 9 to 5. They really promoted work-life balance, which was awesome. But when your brain is always just working, I go home, or I went home and I was always like, so, I've gone to the gym, I've done all that, but I had all this time, it felt like, to do something. So I was like, you know what, why not just like learn business, if you will? And so, and also what happened was I was one of the few friends in my circle, like, I'm sure you can empathize with this, where because I was technical, everybody always came to me for whatever tech question that they had, right? Websites, God knows what, even still printers, or whatever it is, they came to me. And I just had this light bulb moment where I was like, you know what? Instead of like giving all this advice for free and always helping people, I naturally love helping people, but let me take a step back and say, hey, you're gonna have to pay me $100 to
Right,
get my
right.
advice, or for me to help you, or pay whatever. And then that $100 turned into 500, turned into 5K, turned into 10, and then it started to become something where I was like, oh wow, I can maybe do this full time, not in that same incarnation, but like I could be an entrepreneur full time. So I didn't really become a full time entrepreneur until 4 years after I graduated college. And the whole time I had a full time job, but I was just kind of consulting on the side, if you will.
Got it, got it. So consulting was kind of the bridge into entrepreneurship.
Exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then so from this consulting gig, like what did you learn from doing that, and how did you take the next step into entrepreneurship?
Man, it built my confidence, to be honest. I think that was the big thing. I think entrepreneurship can be very scary for a lot of people. And I think that sometimes it's easier to help other people work on their ideas than it is sometimes to work on your own. And so for me, it put me in the sweet spot of like, people taking my advice very seriously, implementing it and seeing success.
Yeah,
And it also pushed me to, step out of my comfort zone. And, what I said went, right? Meaning that if somebody was paying me for advice, it had to be world class. It had to be the best advice I could give with the information I could gather at the time. I wasn't always right, but I tried to be as right as possible. And I generally was always pretty right. But again, it went down to the due diligence, right? So with that said, like it grew my confidence, man. And then there was just something about seeing people wanting to give me money, and then like I was starting to get really high level people come to me, some people who you'd consider celebrities even coming
got
to
it,
me
got
for
it, got
advice.
it.
So, I started to walk with a little bit of swag, and it until I got to the point where I was like, wait, I've helped X, Y, and Z become pretty successful. They've gotten a lot of press, they've raised a lot of money, this and this, and I think it's time to do this for myself. But I struggled with the idea of what I felt like that was passionate enough for me to keep myself up at night working on all day every night. So that was always my struggle, and it took me some time to figure what that was. And eventually it was Big Wolf and Hingeto. But prior to that, that's why I said, you know what, maybe I'll just go more in depth with a fewer set of people while I figure that out. And, the plan worked out as I hope it would. And as far as
Yes.
how I made that transition, go ahead. You were going to say
No,
something?
no, no. I was just listening in admiration.
Yeah, and so my parents were pretty supportive too. I think that was another big thing for me. I almost feel like my parents kind of groomed me. Well, I'll say more my dad. My mom's not a risk taker. She's one of the most brilliant people in the world, but she just doesn't mess with entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
But my dad was kind of always grooming me to kind of, to take on risks, calculated risks. And when I told him I was thinking about leaving, he grilled me like crazy, asked me a billion questions. And eventually it was just like, okay, sounds like you've really thought through this, and I'm there to support you, and I'm proud of you. And so that's just
yeah,
all the words I needed, right? Like, all right, cool. And it didn't. It also helped to say where he. It also helped when he essentially said, "Look, and if you need a lifeline or two, like, please ask me, because I have a hard time asking for help sometimes."
right. I
And
can I can relate to that. Yes.
he just essentially like just said, "Look, go do it, man. I'm proud of you, and I know irregardless, like I'm sure you'll make this work." And yeah, so I did. So that's what gave me the confidence to take that leap. Almost exactly, man, 8 years ago, September 2011 was when I left my job.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. Okay. So I remember when you were doing the consulting, and I come out with a couple of friends to San Francisco, and we ran
Mhm.
into you. And at that time, I think you were doing quite well with the consulting in terms of the kind of money you were bringing in, right? But you
Right,
were also working an incredible number. I think you were sleeping in the office,
man.
or close to it. So can you talk about, I guess, how the way that you work has evolved, or maybe that can be a way for us to bridge into the different business models that you're working on today and how they differ from what you were doing before.
Sure. How I worked before was I was young, I was ready to get at it, whatever it took. So I was always aware of the concept of, work smart, not don't work hard. But I just felt the need to put in the hours.
Yes.
And when I wasn't at work, I found myself being consumed with work related things, sometimes even when I was out and about. So for me, it was just net positive to be at the office,
Yeah.
grinding, learning, and doing the things that I needed to do so that I could feel peace outside of the workplace, even though it didn't always work out like that. So, so yes, I did. I slept at the office a lot more than I'm proud to actually share, because I think at some point it can be destructive for you. It can almost put you in a state of anxiety if you
Right,
don't
right.
do a good job of just like balancing your time, right? Like walk away from the grind for a bit. I remember that time when you came and you were just like, "Hey man, I gotta be honest with you, you don't look good, bro." 'Cause I think I had just woken up and I was just like, I was hurting. But yeah, stuff was good. But again, that around then was what pushed me to say it's time to find a product.
Yes.
As much as I loved working with people, and as much as I love people, I realized like just working with people doesn't scale,
Right.
and I just needed to work on a product that scaled, and that experience is what really pushed me to figure out the product, if you will. As far as like my position on work today, it's I'm married now, as I mentioned, and as you know, I mean, not as I mentioned.
Congratulations again.
Thank you. So I try my best to be balanced across the board, right? Like I can't be grinding all day, every day. And it's not healthy, I think. But I do love working. I think I realized that, there's this whole movement right now that's anti what they call hustle porn, right?
Right, right, right.
Like, oh, these guys, they're destroying it for everybody because they work all the time and they have no work-life balance. But my reality is my hobby is learning new programming, or
Yes.
learning business models. Like that is what I love to do. Like that's my passion. I could do
Right,
it
right.
all day, every day. So now I have to figure out how to balance a bit of like what looks like an unhealthy passion, if you will, with the real world, right? With other things that matter way more, actually.
Yes.
My family, things like that. So yeah, that's just it's truthfully a challenge I still struggle with to this day in figuring the right balance, because I'll have weeks where stuff is all great, I'm sleeping early,
Right.
uh, all's good, work is feeling like it's like going, but there were some weeks where it's like, oh man, I'm reverting back, but I'm conscious of it now. It's not like I think that's one of the big differences. I'm like, oh man, it's getting late. Like, and then I'm starting to think about the next day and the day after, because I can't recover like I used to either. So now there's that repercussion if I'm
Yeah.
not full of sleeping on time. And so, yeah, man.
Everything you're saying, I can completely relate to. So when you figure it out, just let me know.
Will do. Will do.
All right. So you mentioned transitioning into a product. Can you talk to me about that product? Well, those products, I suppose, since it's a couple now.
Yeah, so I was always, really early on, I was always fascinated with a product, but I think I was always, again, early in my career, I lacked the confidence to pursue a product that I felt could stand on its own. Again, because I know people, I love people, I interact well with people. It was almost like this crutch rather, that I could like rely on if something went bad, right? And so with a product, the product has to stand on its own and outside of you to some degree. And I
Yeah.
think early in my career, I was scared of that. I
Right.
was like,
Right.
oh, what X, Y, and Z. Whereas I know that with service, if something went bad happens, I know how to fix it. I can like put in time. I can get on a call. I can I can do all of those things. So that's why I didn't, do anything product really early. With that said, what happened was I started finding myself fascinated with these productized service offerings. So, meaning, I don't know if you're familiar with a company called like Design Pickle, for example.
I've heard of it. I haven't used it.
Yeah, they're founded by this guy Russ Perry. They're like a $10 million ARR business, and what he's done is he's built a platform where he empowers companies to have like a designer And they pay money recurring fee, and it's just like you just put in these requests and that you just get back the designs based on what you want.
Genius.
And it's genius, right? And I had
It's so
this,
simple.
so simple. I built something like this actually 10 years ago, actually longer than that, like almost 15 years ago.
Right.
But I just never launched it. So I was tired of like doing what I noticed a lot of my clients would do, or a lot of my friends would say, which is like, oh, I have this idea and I would never launch it. I'm like, wait, I have the skill set to do anything in the world. Like, what am I doing?
Yes.
I'm letting like fear and self like deprecate, like all of that, like get in the way. So funny enough, that's around when we met, which was I'd had a little bit of success with an app. One of my clients, she got a crazy amount of PR for a mobile safety alarm that we'd worked on together. I had helped her kind of like come up with the technical specifications. My team had designed
Thank
it.
you for tuning in to the Game of Grow movement. If you'd like to hear more, head to gameofgrow.com to sign up for my weekly updates about my own journey.
Crazy
as I create
we won
powerful,
some crazy
profitable,
awards
and
at
impactful
the
business of my
Consumer
choice.
Electronics Show.
And I want to hear about your journey
like
as well.
the iPhone,
If you want to connect
Kindle,
on
and all
social
these
media,
crazy
at
products
Game of Grow,
Foursquare had won before.
Instagram, Facebook,
And so that
and
was
Twitter.
when I think
On LinkedIn,
I was like,
just search for my name.
maybe the juice
Don't
is
forget
on
to join
mobile.
us in the Game of Grow
I don't know what
community,
in mobile
which you can search
yet,
for
but I
on
think it's in
Facebook.
mobile.
And if you love the show,
and I think
the
mobile is
biggest way
growing
you can
like
help
crazy,
is to
and then a
subscribe,
lot of this is
rate, and
anecdotal,
review, and
but
then
it was
find a
just
like-minded
feeling
friend
that
you can
I
help
had.
to do the same.
And so I
Thank you
decided
so
to
much,
double
and
down
I'll talk
in
to you
that
soon.
space. So I started consuming all the material I could in mobile. Games not quite yet. Until the program that you and I kind of met in. If you okay, you know what? I see enough here to believe this example and to know that like my feeling and gut was validated, but to the community, to be around other people like you, who were kind of like pushing the charge forward with everybody else who had taken the program, right? To see somebody who's like, oh, hey guys, this is what I'm doing, and I'm now making $10 a month, and everybody's like celebrating with you. And it's like, hey guys, it's now 400. It's like, oh, look at you,
Right.
I didn't take it seriously. And I think one day you said something like, yeah, guys, I'm at like 5. And then I remember when you had your fruit ninja, the bike like little
Right. Yeah.
I was like, man, okay, there's something very real. It's not just this. Like you just gotta. It's one thing to learn something. It's another thing to apply it, right? And so that's when we started Big Wolf. Around that time, a long friend of mine, a long-time friend and colleague of mine, we just said, hey, I think it's time. Let's just start making some games and let's just see what happens. And let's not get too caught up in the hype. Let's stay true to who we are.
Yeah.
So let's not, get bogged down in trying to like launch 500 apps into the store. Let's like focus on like quality apps out there, quality gaming experiences, and let's partner with people who understand user acquisition. Because for as polished as I know we can make apps, for as amazing of engineering feats I knew we could do, I knew that we severely lacked the funds to actually blow anything up from a marketing perspective.
Right,
and I'm not intuitively a marketer either. So I knew it was really important early on for us to be successful long term to partner with people who understood the user acquisition side of games or apps. And so we did that.
How'd you go about establishing those partnerships?
Man, I just looked at my network and I just told people what I was doing. Really early on, I realized it's really important to talk about what you're doing because you just don't know what the world will put in front of you. I noticed really early, I noticed a massive positive correlation with whenever I would post a website I did on Facebook and the number of inquiries I would get. Now, it was all like word of mouth for the most part, but it was talking about what I was doing, because then what I realized was I started to become top of mind for a lot of people when it came to X, Y, and Z, right? And so I realized it was time for me to start talking about the app side of things. I reached out to 4 or 5 friends that I knew who were tangentially in the app or gaming space. And through those outreaches, one of them introduced me to a guy who happened to have some really early Facebook success on their gaming platform. And we ended up forming a joint venture partnership, amongst other things. So it's always been mostly organic. A lot of times what ends up happening too is I'll see a company that I think would be a great partner, and I'll just email the CEO. Because
Right,
I'll be
right,
like, hey,
right.
this is our pet breed. This is what I know how to do, and I now include a few words that I know will like light them up and say, oh, snap. Like I'll talk to like the problems that I can assume that they're having right now, or to the aspiration of their current like initiatives that they've publicly stated online or whatever. And I have a crazy response rate, and they almost always turn into some sort of partnership. Um,
Wow, I gotta know
yeah,
those magic words, man.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
um,
I mean, it's not even magic words more so than it is just like not sending cold emails that like have no relevance to the person. Really, it's
yes.
like it's so silly, but it works so well. Like, and at the end of the day, like somebody told me something a long time ago, where a lot of established, successful folks just want to help the up and comers as well. And so if you don't come across like, like just a bad person, or you don't come across as somebody who's potentially going to be a leech, and you come across as somebody who's genuinely trying to provide value,
Yeah.
like it just makes the conversations easier. Even if sometimes they'll direct you to their corporate dev people or to their next in line, whomever it is, doesn't matter, because now that person has to respond for the most part, because they typically, their CEO is going to be like, oh, whatever happened to those guys who made that game that reached out to me? Did you follow up? And you don't want to be that person at that company. So a lot of them want to like make sure they at least follow through as best as they can up until to a certain point. Um, yeah. So it's always worked pretty well. And gaming isn't that massive. And again, for us, it was identifying the biggest pain point that I felt a lot of bigger companies, people who I deem to have massive user acquisition budgets had, which is games are hard, right? Games are hits driven, as they say, even though
Yeah.
I don't actually fully believe that. But
What's your perspective?
man, my perspective is that there is a formula. It's formulaic to some degree, right? Like there is an aspect of luck, there is an aspect of hit, and
Yeah,
hit is also like relative, right?
of course.
For a company like me, a hit is a $50 million game or $10 million game. Even a $5 million game is a hit.
Right.
Uh, to Wooga, to some of these guys, if they're tracking $20 million, they're killing it, right?
Right. Right.
So or Supercell, like their games need to be $1 billion potentials, right? Like Machine Zone. Otherwise, it's just not worth the company's time and resources, and it's fair.
Just
Um,
you're talking about based on how much they put into development,
Based on
marketing,
how they put in,
etc.
et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and what the ROI has to be. But even if you look at a lot of their games, they'll have a formula in place to some
Right.
degree, right? Their games aren't massive variations from one another.
Yeah.
They all hinge on something that's relevant or gameplay that's known to work. Maybe they have their twist on it. There is like a way, like it's very hard to just come out and try to be crazy innovative and just say, oh, I think that it would be cool if I took a selfie and it projected here and I could play with that. Like the more crazy you start going, of course, it's going to be really hard to create a very successful experience.
Right.
The more you go with proven things and proven marketing channels, or proven or nascent that are promising and not overcrowded yet, the higher likelihood you just have of general success. I don't know. That's just my take, because for us, for a relatively small studio, we've had a lot of quote unquote success, and a lot of veterans have asked, like, wait, how? I'm not even from the gaming world. Like, how is it that you guys we have a joint venture game that has 10 million plus downloads. We've struck some pretty big joint venture partnerships, some that will be announced very soon. And again, it just comes down to doubling down on what we know really well, and we see trends and we understand them, and we try not to get too distracted. And we hop on, like, and I think I learned this one from you. I remember back in the day when you would have some games, and the themes of some of the games that you were pursuing were always like, they typically had like, there's something going on in the world around this thing, right?
Right. Right.
And it just makes your marketing a lot easier because people are already talking about X, Y, and Z. And so we don't do it to that degree, but it's that same mindset. Like, how do you make sure that what you're working on is highly relevant to the time?
No, that definitely makes sense. So in terms of, you started to talk about some of the numbers. So can you talk more about that?
Mm-hmm.
So what's been your experience in terms of the success you guys have had? You don't have to get exact or anything, but just so people have an idea, I guess, what kind of return are you able to create, and what kind of investment does that take to get there? For anybody who might be thinking about this type of business.
Yeah, it's interesting. I could go on and on. I could do a whole hour on this. I'll try to distill it down. I think so. The way that we did things, and I can't go into specifics, but I tried to limit my downside, meaning that it was, at the time I had no money. So it was imperative that whatever deals I struck mostly looked like zero outlay to me.
Right.
And so I structured everything as such, and I was still able to negotiate significant upside.
Yeah.
Meaning that, like, if these things worked, that, like, we would also eat off of the top. And maybe not as much as a situation where we were like, we put in our own money as well. And so that was really important to me back then. As far as generally in this type of business, I think a lot of people think, oh, I have an app. I'm going to make it. I'm going to put it in a store, and I'm going to be the Flappy Bird guy.
No, you're not.
And it just, no, you're not. It doesn't work like that. Like, there's a concept of you need to market to your users. And so, like, where are you going to market to your users? So now you need to understand how much it costs to get users in your space. Like, have you done a Facebook ad test for users that are highly relevant to whatever it is that your app or your game is, right? And have you tried experimenting, buying in other apps? So, like, there's a concept of so there's ad SDKs, right? There's like advertisers and publisher networks that exist out there where you can essentially publish, or where you can buy ads in another game or in another app, right? And have you done that? Have you gotten a sense of how much it's going to cost you to acquire a single user? And then have you done the projections to say, okay, if that's what it's generally costing right now, and some of these prices go up and up, or sometimes they're down in certain times of the year. Once you've done those projections, okay, you need to understand how long it takes for your game to return that capital, right? And so that's why sometimes, especially like you'll see this in hyper casual are games that are meant to be super easy to play. You play them when you're in the restroom or on the bus, and you get bombarded with ads in the first few days. And what you're seeing there is they're trying to recover the spend the spend that they used to acquire you in the first place, because you most likely saw that game in Instagram or on Facebook or in another game, right? And so they're playing an arbitrage game where they want to make their money back, because they also know that 99% of mobile players don't spend real money. They'll watch ads, but they don't spend money. So yeah, you do all of those projections, and then you figure, and even when you have it right, what can happen is you have to deal with the trough, meaning that, like, you have to, like, buy it, and you know that it takes 30 days to make that money back. So you're spending positively, but you're not going to start making that money back for some time. Not to talk of Apple and Google holding your money for a little bit extra.
Right.
So, like, it's a game that can be hard to play if you want to, like, do it like the big girls and the big boys do, if you will.
Yeah.
If you want to do it recreationally, I struggle with telling people, like, oh yeah, you should make an app, and that can do well for you financially if you're not able to figure out at least or a partner who can do that for you, right? If you're like, look, I just want to wash my hands clean. I know how to make great, compelling experiences in whatever niche. I have a partner who will handle marketing, and they'll even put in their own money into this because they see the metrics are great. Metrics being like how often people are playing the game, how often, what are their session lengths, how are they returning back to the game. If you don't have that, it can be a tough business, man, to be honest with you.
No, I'm with you, man. I definitely appreciate that. And I also want to talk about Hingeto a little bit, but before we do that, I want to know what's been the hardest part of this whole journey, and you can take it from any company or any experience you like.
The hardest part of the journey, man, there's a lot. It's just the high highs and the low lows.
Yes.
And because, like, the lows can be very, very low. And I could not do it alone. I think I see a lot of folks who want to do the whole solo founder thing, and that's great. But you got to at least have like if you're going to be a solo founder, make sure you have an advisory board of others who you can just go, put your shoulders on. I mean, lean your head on during difficult times, because it is, man, it can be.
Tell me a story, man. This is therapy.
I mean, at the risk of sounding like a cliche, like I remember so during those times, I remember, so this is, I talk about this as one of my low lows, is stuff was going well, but sometimes I'd have these situations where a client owed me, 5 figures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, they owe me money, so I know the money's coming, but my bank account is like very low, like sometimes close to negative, and so it's hard because, dang, I know this money's coming, but it's not necessarily this recurring revenue thing where I could go get like a invoice refactoring solution for this, and sometimes it's this one-time situation as well, or I haven't, again, I was younger, where I didn't do the prep work to build relationships with my bank to be able to like get lifelines, if you will. And so I remember one time I had to ask a guy who I'd essentially coached, a guy who was one of my mentees, who has sold millions of dollars in memberships, and he is doing really well. And I had to borrow money from him because it was just like, man, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
Literally, I had no other choice. And it was just like, it was humbling. It was, at times I felt a little bit like, man, I can't believe that this is what it's come down to. But you know what? Like, again, it was a fellow entrepreneur who understood.
Yeah.
Who got it. Like, it didn't matter that, this person is younger than me or this person learned from me. At some point, students surpass the masters all the time. That's what you want. That's what you want to see happen. And so it was good that I had that. So that's one example low that I had it. But and again, like I said earlier, I have a hard time asking for help. So for me to do that, like, it took. I kind of actually, I'm being dramatic, but a part of me felt like it died.
Right.
Because I
could understand. Trust me.
It was tough.
Trust me. Nah, I've been there, so I can definitely understand. And oftentimes, I guess if people start to read stories about you or hear certain things about you, they'll think that your life can only go up and up and up, and it's just success after success, and it's rarely that way.
Absolutely. All
right. So let's talk about Hingeto. Tell us about the company. What does Hingeto do? How did the idea come about, and how are you guys executing today?
Yeah, Hingeto came about. It actually was not my idea. It was around the time I had just kicked off Big Wolf. Big Wolf was looking promising, but I did feel that in my head at the time, I thought that Big Wolf was going to be the cash cow, right? The supported lifestyle. Like, once I figure it out, I'm never going to raise for it. I'm never going to like do any of that. I'm just going to enjoy the cash and just have that be the thing that allows me to take bets, if you will.
Yes.
And so with that said, I was looking for the $1 billion idea as well, right? At this point, I felt like I'd picked up enough skills and insight to try to work on something that was pretty massive. And but again, I kind of had a hard time thinking through what that would be. But I got introduced to this guy whose name was Leandro Robinson, and he had started a division at Karmaloop. So Karmaloop back in the day was this streetwear website that you could buy. Like, yeah, I'm sure you remember it. And he'd started a division there that grew really fast. I think it went from like 0 to 40 million in like 3 or 5 years. And he did it as an employee, but he was always just a guy that I was impressed by when I got introduced to him. And he was telling me about this issue with inventory that was like afflicting the market, and retail and commerce generally. And so I said to myself, this sounds like the type of big problem that I would like to work on.
What was the issue that was affecting retail?
So lack of traffic for one. So Amazon in a nutshell, but like lack of traffic in stores, in the malls. As you see, malls are becoming more and more ghost towns.
Yes.
Due to online shopping. And B, the inventory risk that a lot of people, especially founders of underrepresented backgrounds, they tend to, how do I phrase this? The problems that were afflicting them when they were starting clothing brands, right? Particularly around inventory commitments they would have to make because they
Okay.
were getting their stuff manufactured. Even if it was manufactured domestically, you run into these issues because how many of this shirt do you make in advance,
Right,
right?
right.
And then if you're getting it made in China, now you're talking like months, right? And as you know, trends are changing like crazy all the
Yeah.
time. Like the black hoodie that was hot like whenever ago is just not hot 2 weeks later anymore. It's like you're late B, you know?
Right,
So it's
right. So
just
then you got
like
to hold the bag on all the
so
inventory.
you got to hold back on it. So, and then all your value, your capital is locked into this inventory that you're most likely going to have to liquidate and sell for pennies on the dollar.
Right.
So it's just, and this is rampant. So, and it affects large retailers the same way it does your mom and pop who's trying to start a t-shirt company. They face variations of the exact same problems. So our first go at it was Hinge2's first go at it was to be we called ourselves Kickstarter for shopping for fashion brands, which was, hey brands or hey people, stop making stuff that you don't know that's going to sell. Instead, put it up on a Kickstarter like experience and only make the things that have enough traction. I
Right,
think
right.
our goal was eventually to also like tie in like predictive analytics on things like, oh, people seem to be really spending a lot of time on here. They haven't pulled out their card, but most people tend to be doing this. And so you have a very high chance of, you should just make this anyways, even though nobody has committed to it, but make it in this run. Like that was the vision. And it was working actually. It was working okay, but it just wasn't working fast enough. And the other thing that hit us was we realized a lot of brands are so stuck. We were asking for a massive behavior change that we just weren't able to get people to make. And a lot of brands are really about being aspirational. They're really about, they feel like they're the ones who dictate the trends, even though that's not true. And so it was hard for them to come on board and say, wait, you want me to showcase this design I've been thinking about for weeks in advance and beg my customers to give me money for me to make it? He's like, nah, man, that's not how it works. I make the stuff and they buy it because I know it's good for them. Like, and it's like, okay, how's your P&L looking?
Right, right.
Let me see that inventory, that warehouse that has like stuff that has never anyhow. So we realized it was going to be an uphill battle. So we pivoted. We pivoted a few times, but what we landed on that seemed to be working, in which is our primary business today, is we built a marketplace enablement platform. So what that means is we enable online retailers to sell more product without taking on inventory risk. So one of our largest customers, PacSun, for example, Pacific Sunwear, they have a store in almost every mall in America. They have a certain demographic of people that are coming to them to buy stuff from them. And they just can't sell enough of their warehouse products to their constituency. Like, they need more product, and fashion and commerce is about offering assorted styles at a fresh clip. Every 2 weeks, people need to be coming to your site and seeing different stuff. Otherwise, at some point, they just stop coming, right? So that's the retention mechanism, if you will.
Right, right, right.
So to enable that type of workflow, you need to start to tap into inventory that's not sitting in your own warehouse. So what we allow them to do is tap into selling products from a bunch of like world-class brands that they already might even be selling in some capacity, but we let them tap into their new styles much more quickly without them having to like buy it up front. And so now it's like a no risk thing for them because they can list the stuff on the site, and if it sells great, and it gets to the inventory source. And if it doesn't sell, there's no capital outlay, and like everybody's fine, like nobody cares, right? So it's a model that we empower customers like them and others to do, and that's been working well.
Got it. How long have you been running with that model?
Yeah, so with that model, so we started Hinge2 in 2016, late 2015 officially, and we did YC. We raised to date we've raised about $3 million for it, and the specific marketplace model, I want to say it's been 2.5 years. Unfortunately, we did a lot of things that we had some other ancillary businesses within Hinge2 that were net probably negative for us. So, for example, at one point we were actually making clothes because, in the spirit of like, oh, you identify this pain point that some of your customers have, and you think, oh, can this be the thing that makes sense to scale? And we found a lot of our customers needed like additional horsepower in getting some of their products made, or they were having issues with their existing manufacturers. And a lot of the team back then had that background. It was a very traditionally retail team with a little bit of tech there, and so back then we were powering the fashion lines for some well-known people. Like we literally were making 80% of their stuff, wow. And yeah, and it was profitable and it was a good business, but it was like a small business, right? And when you take venture capital, like
right,
there's a certain expectation of growth, and there's a certain expectations of what's worth your time doing, and that was not. I don't know. We don't. It's hard because it was so profitable and it did help us out a lot. To be frank, as far from a runway perspective, but with that said, we should have focused from the very beginning. But it was hard because we also didn't realize the way the timing worked, and that's just life. It wasn't immediately clear that the marketplace product was going to be the thing that had the most legs and that people were seemingly willing to pay a lot for. It took a long time for our first massive enterprise customer to go live. And even though we had some smaller ones that were doing okay, they just weren't doing volume either that would like warrant us say, oh yeah, this is the thing we should be only focused on.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's pretty fascinating, man. You know, one thing I would love to hear about, because I think a lot of people are interested in, you know, being able to raise funds from venture capitalists, YC,
absolutely,
and that entire world. But I think there are a lot of misconceptions around what it is, what it takes. Can you just talk about that? Talk about your perspective, and you can take it in any direction that makes sense.
Yeah. So, you know, when in my youth, to be honest, when I was in my early 20s, I was kind of anti-VC, and I was anti-VC for a few reasons. I think one was because, look, at the time, I say at the time, even now, like you look at the numbers of the companies that receive investments from traditional VC, and for folks that look like me and you, it doesn't look good, right?
And so handsome guys, right?
Right, handsome guys, exactly. Handsome guys with little beards, right? Exactly. But so for me, you know, my mindset was like, man, I'm not gonna let anybody tell me that I can't start a business. Like nobody is gonna tell me I can't start a business when I want to start a business. So I'm not even gonna waste my time going to these VCs who are gonna push me down, put me down, and try to mock me, even though I have the same pedigree as all their other investments. Like, no thanks. Nobody has time for that. Like, I'll do this by myself with my own two hands. That was my mindset in my youth. I think today there's certain types of businesses that, you know, you need to raise money. You need to raise from venture capitalists. And I used to hate this, but the reality is, if you're able to go to venture capitalists and propose your business and your plan, and they give you kind of like the stamp of approval, if you will, and it is a validating thing, right? It's a validating thing, and there's some businesses that, again, you just need capital to go after them. Like you don't have enough rich uncles or aunts unless you're certain people to be able to fund those types of aspirations, or you can't grow fast enough, or even if you are growing fast, now it's in your interest to take the entire market, because now you validated the space that had no competitors. But guess what? Now competitors are like, oh crap, look at that thing working. I'm going to go do this too. And so now it behooves you to go raise a lot of money and open up just grow such that your second place competitor remains a distant second place, right? They become the inferior version of you, and people know them as the people that came after you. And so venture capital has its place, and a powerful place, right? And I think, again, if you have a big vision, you have to raise money to some degree, and I think that there's nothing wrong with it. I think the expectations that come with it, though, are you do have to grow, you do have to be chasing a $200 to $1 billion vision. Actually, I'll say $1 billion vision, and if you end up at 200 million, okay, fine. you have to think big. You have to want to go big, and you have to be willing to, ride that treadmill, right? Because then when you have some success, and some of what I'm saying is ringing less true these days, but I'll just say it in its current form. And you have to be willing to say, oh man, stuff is going really well. And, again, we want to maintain our number one position, or we have all these aspirations we want to go after. Now we have to go raise some more, and we have to dilute ourselves a little bit more along the way. And yeah, it's just a treadmill that you got to be willing to hop on. And it's not bad, and it's not like good.
Right.
It's just, it is a vehicle. So
No, that's helpful, man. So what do you think differentiates the kind of, for everybody listening,
yep.
what differentiates a business that is appropriate or needs venture capital from, or an idea that is appropriate or needs VC from one that doesn't? Is it just the size of the addressable market, or how would you call it?
Yeah, I would say it's the size of the addressable market for sure. But that's also a tricky metric to use, because like, I mean, I could start a barbershop right now, and technically my addressable market for a certain demographic might be large, but then I'm constrained by location, right? So ideally it's location indifferent, like it's indifferent to location, has a high addressable market, or if it is location dependent, that like it clearly scales across locations, and that you can still maintain your unit economics, meaning that you're still able to make money at new locations, and that you have a playbook in which you can go to a new location and launch and maintain profits, or purposefully not maintain profits, right? So that's the other thing. When you raise venture capital, you get a cheat code, which means that you get to sell $20 for 17 to some degree, right? And you got to be careful, because, and what I mean by that is you get to subsidize your product's costs in the interest of growth, in the interest of getting validation from the market, or in the interest of capturing more of the market.
Right.
And it's an exercise that makes sense most of the time. But it's an exercise that can also be the very vehicle that like burns a company, right? Because you can sell $20. I mean, you can sell. You get me. Like people will obviously like get a subsidized product all day and happily pay the reduced price. But when you suddenly like say, okay, it's now $20. I'm no longer giving you $20 for 17. It's now $20. You're like, yeah. It's like, okay, I don't know.
Right. No, got it.
So yeah, the type of ideas, man, I don't know. It's just like small business ideas. It's tend not to make sense, and a lot of people get confused with, oh, but I have this idea and I can see it changing the world, and I think it's really big. But a lot of times it's either like, what you're thinking of is really just a feature in like an existing app probably, or it's just not a big enough market to get people excited for, or you just haven't done a good job of like explaining how this gets really, really big. And again, like, I don't know, it sucks, but like to go after that type of business needs a bit of access. So you have to be willing to also put yourself, you don't have to necessarily have access from the beginning, but you have to be willing to fly to the places that will give you access, right? Like, I think of an entrepreneur who I advise, and she comes to the Bay, she goes to New York, she goes to LA, she goes to where there's the investor density.
Yeah.
And she built her relationships there, but she doesn't live in any of these places, but she knows that that's part of what's gonna like matter, is like trying to get in these networks and build that. And again, all of this is changing, thankfully, for the better. And I think location is becoming less and less like important. And as a matter of fact, it's becoming like not good to open up like certain types of businesses in these like tech hubs, if you will. So yeah, man, it's yeah. I hope that makes sense. I hope that answers your question.
It sure does, man. It sure does. All right. So getting close towards the end, because I don't want to hold you forever.
Okay.
But I want to know what's allowed you and your team to be successful in this endeavor. Like, what are the skills, and how have you developed them?
What are the skills? I think voracious reading, just reading from people who've done it before, is super important.
Any top books you would recommend?
Man, I like. So I'm a fan of both the bootstrap entrepreneur and the venture back entrepreneur, right? Like I think they're both heroes in different capacities or in different
For
ways.
sure,
So
for sure.
from the bootstrap side, I really love like the base camp guys.
Yeah,
So like Hansen, Jason Frieden, like they have a book called Rework, which I
yeah.
really like, and I just like their whole philosophy. So I read all their books like the moment they drop. Um, I like the 4 hour work week. I think that also, unlocked something for me. Lean Startup was a very good one. Uh, whew, I'm trying to think what books transformed my life. I can't think of the rest right now.
Three's
But
good, man. Three's good.
yeah,
No, definitely appreciate that. All right, man. Anything else from the skills or the skill side, or anything that people should be thinking
skill
about?
side. I think it's just from a hard skills perspective. I think it's just like it's more about making sure that like whatever skills you acquire. Oh, so for example, I learn a lot of stuff on Udemy,
Yeah.
and then I also learn a lot of stuff from courses by other people who I know have done it before. So,
Right.
for
Right.
example, like, I know you have like an offering where you try to teach people success in apps. And so, like, it behooves me to learn from you than it does from a book, than it does from some person who can only talk from it from a very high level. Like,
Right.
I, I have bought so many like courses online
Yeah.
from people that just
I,
have that highly relevant.
I've done that too.
So that's been a big, massive skill builder for me. As far as hard skills, I am an engineer, so it is a bit technically easier
For
for tech
sure.
businesses, right? Because I can either build some variation of it by myself or build the whole thing by myself or lead a team of people to build it. And I know the pitfalls to look for. I know how not to get taken advantage of. And so these are like massive, right?
Yes.
Give me
Yes.
that, if you will. On the business side, I think skills, man, again, it just comes down to book, comes down to practicing,
Yeah.
and it comes down to also just like consult, getting the right, like where you fall short is just learning how to build advisory boards around the things that you just know you may never become an expert in, or you just are always going to be a little bit weak in. So like you just need to like spitball with somebody. So this is expensive, but for example, I spitball with our attorney
Yeah.
because it's an expensive one, but man, is it worth it, right?
Yes. Yes.
And then other CEOs, right? I put myself around situations, or CTOs. I put myself around situations with people who are very similar, such that I can like learn through osmosis and also ideally give back. So I don't know. Those are where I acquire my skills. The actual skills in and of themselves, they just vary.
I
And
like it. I like it.
yeah.
I like it. So, what's an interesting story from business that many people, or life, that many people haven't heard before?
An interesting story from business. Oh man, I need to prep for that one. Interesting story of business. Yeah, none's coming to mind right
All
now.
right, all right. I have to get back to you sometime on that, man.
For sure, for sure. I feel like I have a few, but I would ramble too much, so I need to.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so I mean, you're up to a lot. You've done a whole lot over these past years. Big Wolf, Hingeto. What's next for you?
Man, what's next? I think just seeing both of them through, and to be honest with you, like. I think, in the future, I absolutely see myself sitting on the other side of the table in a venture capital capacity. Again, I love entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurships. I think I have a lot of unique insight to help underrepresented founders specifically. So I think I see that as down the line, but I'm not ready for that.
Yeah.
I have like some, business successes, if you will, that I have to kind of get. Or actually, no, that's BS. I have some personal goals in mind that I want to see through, and when I see them through, I'll evaluate what's next. But I think it'll be along the lines of, finding time to give back to the community, however that looks like, and from a career aspiration or a space perspective, to be frank, like I'm excited about a lot of things. I'm excited to learn about the implications of crypto. So like, is there something there that makes sense? I'm excited by, all the various potentials in gaming, even where that takes us, in medicine, both in a good way and in a bad way. Like I'm scared for the future of what we're kind of able to do. So all that stuff fascinates me, but I don't know that I ever hop into it as an entrepreneur. And I think that's one thing I'm realizing. I'm also getting a little bit older, so I think the way that I'm going to have to start like dabbling.
You're still a young man.
I'm still young, but yeah. But the way I'm going to have to dabble in some of these other industries is by investing in entrepreneurs pursuing these awesome big ideas, or it's in being on their advisory boards or something like that. So finding a way to keep my ear to the ground, if you will, but without feeling the need to be the one that's building. And frankly, if both of my ventures are the only things I ever do from a business perspective, not an impact perspective, I'll be at peace with that, to be honest with you, man. I am young, but I feel like I've lived a very long life.
I completely understand, man. All right, so what's your parting advice for entrepreneurs? Maybe they're bumping their head right now. Maybe they're going through the hard times, but they want to build something big and impactful.
All you can do is take the next 4 or 5 steps. My parting advice is that once you've taken those 4 or 5 steps, the next 4 or 5 will present themselves to you.
But just start.
So that's all you can do, and you have to get comfortable and
really just do it.
And maybe sometimes shock yourself. And knowing that,
throw yourself in uncomfortable situations.
Beautiful things are on the other side. Learn how to swim. Like, don't go into the deep end all the way, right? Like, jump into shallow water, but just do something. Like, start right now. Like, the future you will be thankful. And here's the thing that I've always realized is there is no way. You can't chart your path. You just can't do it. Like, nobody can do it. All you can do is take the next 4 or 5 steps and believe that once you've taken those 4 or 5 steps, the next 4 or 5 will present themselves to you. And that's all you can do. And you have to get comfortable in being comfortable with that and knowing that. And beautiful things are on the other side. Like, if you just have that mindset of just start now, take those few steps, and the world will will conspire to make your dreams a reality. But you have to start, and you have to start taking those steps, because otherwise it's just what's on the other side is just not going to show itself to you. It's just going to be hey, it's well, you're not walking towards me, so why would I present myself to you? Right? You got to walk towards it, and it'll be oh, hey, guess what? Here you go. Boom. Here's this person that you're not supposed to be able to have access to, but because you've shown that this and this, here you go. And that's how it happens, and that's how it works for almost everybody that's become successful. So
I love it, man. Couldn't have put it better. Got to start now. Got to take those steps. Beautiful things on the other side. Thank you, man.
No, for sure, man. It's always a pleasure, man. Always love catching up.
Yes, sir.